Here we are getting ready to head to week 12. Michigan is 9-0 and on a crash course with Ohio State for a shot at the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis. The game takes place November 26th at 11 o'clock, and Michigan is currently number 3 in the CFP poll. Oh, wait, we're not talking about college football. We're talking about high school football. I'm sorry, guys. Hey, we had a great week, obviously, especially in Class 1A, where all 4 of our NUIC teams made the quarterfinals. First time since 1999 that 4 NUIC teams have made the quarterfinals. In this type of format, the 1 through 16 breakdown, it's the first time that we've ever seen the NUIC put all 4 teams in the quarterfinals in the same class. The last time we had 4 teams in the quarterfinals was in 2018 when we saw Lena Winslow, Forreston, Dakota in the 1A quarterfinals, and EPC was in the Class 2A quarterfinals. So obviously, with the way that the format is set up, all 4 teams in the quarters means we're guaranteed a team at the state championship in Champaign on Friday, November 25th at 10 a.m. In Memorial Stadium. So obviously it's exciting times for the NUIC in general. We've come to hear about the Class 1A playoffs being the NUIC tournament. We've heard references to like it doesn't matter who's going to make it from the South. There's going to be a team from the NUIC waiting there for them to punch them in the mouth. In either case, it's great to be a fan of the NUIC, and we got some good games on the slate here. Some rematches, obviously, from the regular season, and of course, a couple rivalry games or old rivalry games that are getting to relive themselves as well. Taking a look at scores from Class 1A for the week, obviously we saw Lena Winslow beat Rova Williamsfield 76-7. Now I've heard some reports that is a new Class 1A scoring record. The 76 points that Lena Winslow put up. I did pull up some more information. I took a look back at 2012. The IHSA does have the record incorrect. They have it listed as 74 points, but if you actually take a look at Leroy's point total for that game in 2012, they actually put up 78 points in their second round win. So this obviously is a large point differential for Lena Winslow, and from what I can tell, the 69-point score differential is the largest point differential, tied with what Chicago Hope did this year in the first round with their 69-0 win over Chicago Corliss. So we've already seen 2 69-point differential games in the Class 1A playoffs. From what I can see, both are the largest point differential in the Class 1A playoff history. Obviously, we saw CPC put up a 66-point differential back in round 1 against Dupo. So lots of big scores here in the 2022 playoffs, especially in Class 1A. A lot of the powers to be that we expected have definitely made their way to the forefront. If you take a look at the South bracket in Class 1A, obviously it's pretty much played out to chalk according to seedings. All the top seeds made it into the second round with the exception of Salt Fork's win over Red Hill back in round 1. And now you have all top 4 seeds into the quarterfinals with 1 seed Ridgeview Lexington playing 4 seed Tuscola, and that game will be in Colfax. And then you have 2 seed Camp Point Central playing 3 seed Greenfield Northwestern, and that game will be in Camp Point. So, the South bracket, obviously we were expecting some upsets down there. Those upsets did not come to fruition. Some of those games that we thought would be more picked to be upsets would have been the Rushville-Cumberland matchup. Obviously, a lot of people had Central A&M beating Cesar-Valier, which did not come to fruition. And then even the Villa Grove route game was another game that people felt would be a good one there, and it did not come out that way either. So either way, it's been an interesting ride. Taking a look at the North bracket to finish out what we saw, Fulton beat Rockford Lutheran 28-0. So now they will play host to Lena Winslow. That game will be a kickoff at 1 p.m. Forreston beat Chicago Hope. That was a highly anticipated matchup. A lot of people were high on Hope because they had beat Quincy Notre Dame earlier in the year. 33-19, I believe, was the final score there. They beat Marquette 40-25. But if you took a look at their body of work, that was really the only time that Hope did anything really well. Some of their games that you felt they should have won by larger margins, they did not. Forreston obviously entered the playoffs at 5-4. Not the record we anticipated Forreston to have at the beginning of the season. I honestly had picked Forreston to be a 7-2 team, but costly mistakes throughout the season cost them a couple games that they probably should have won. And if you take a look back, I mentioned it before, you can find about 6 minutes worth of game time where that differential in play from the Cardinals could have resulted in an 8-1 record rather than a 5-4 record. So obviously that 5-4 mark is definitely a stretch, to say the least. But at the same time, Forreston is definitely beginning to fire on all cylinders as they take down Hope 44-16. That sets them up with a rematch of the 2018 quarterfinals and the 2011 quarterfinals, where Forreston will play host to Dakota. Dakota at the 11 seed gets the upset win for the second week in a row over Marquette, 30-19. Obviously, they had that nail-biter win in the first round against Iroquois West, where they were down 14-0 early in the third quarter. Had to battle their way back. They had to fight against 4 turnovers in the game. Came out with a 2-point win, 16-14, scoring the winning touchdown with under 4 minutes to go in the game, and then holding it off for the win. Against Marquette, they obviously jumped out quick. Marquette got the first points on the board to go up 7-0, which would hold going into the second quarter. And then Dakota put on 22 points in the second quarter to take a commanding 22-7 lead. A couple lapses there allowed Marquette to get back into the game to make the halftime score 22-19. But the second half was all Dakota as they held onto the ball for the majority of the second half. Were able to punch another score on in the fourth quarter. They held the ball for 10 of the 12 minutes in that quarter, just grinding out the win there. Obviously running, I believe I saw it was the same play basically 22 times in a row before they went to a different play. So Dakota obviously found something that they could work on. You heard it in the gameplay announcement from Butters and Don Wernz as well, that they could clearly see they had found a hole in Marquette's defense, and they continued to attack it over and over and over again. And it proved well as the Indians move on to get the rematch that they wanted with the Cardinals. Obviously, Forreston also was looking forward to this rematch as well, as they want to avenge their loss from week 4 where Dakota won 34-28. Down south, obviously Ridgeview Lexington, like I said, will move on to host Tuscola. They beat Salt Fork 58-20. Tuscola beat Route in a very close matchup 29-26. Tuscola was actually my pick to win that game in my bracket, so I'm excited that they did win. But Coach Barry Creviston and I have conversed quite a bit over the season and past seasons as well. And unfortunately, Route had the opportunity to take this. They actually had been the underdog originally when the playoff brackets came out. They turned into the favorites in this game. They did have to go on the road to Tuscola, came up a bit short, 29-26. So good season by Route. Unfortunately, comes up just a little bit short. Had it not, we could have seen 3 teams from the WIVC in the quarterfinals as well, and that would have been definitely something to talk about. However, the WIVC does get 2 teams in the quarterfinals, and they will pair up with each other as Camp Point Central beat Cesar-Villiers 24-0. Camp Point Central is the team that we saw in the 2018 state championship game when they lost to Forreston 44-8 or 44-6. I mean, which was a running clock contest, but they will get a game with the WIVC South champion Greenfield Northwestern, who beat Cumberland 26-0. Camp Point Central comes in this game undefeated 11-0. Greenfield Northwestern comes in with a 10-1 record. Their lone blemish on the season is a 34-20 loss to Route. Route had lost to Camp Point Central in the regular season and WIVC North matchup 28-0. So clearly CPC is going to come in this game as the favorite. But anything can happen. GNW has definitely been a team to watch out for in the WIVC the past few years. Their best team was probably the 2020 COVID year. They did go 6-0 in that spring season, but not having a playoffs, we didn't really get to see the full potential of what that team could have done in a playoff field. So it is what it is at this point in time. We can't go back and change it as much as we would all love to, but here we are, and it's going to set up a great quarterfinal matchup throughout our playoffs. Looking at Class 2A, just to dabble into 2A a little bit here, again, we see quite a few teams that we expected to be there, and we see some teams that shouldn't be there, or that we didn't expect to be there, I should say. Obviously, they've earned their right to be there, but it's not who we expected to see there. Obviously, in the north, the number 1 seed, Maroa Forsyth Trojans, continue to move on. This is obviously the first time we've ever seen Maroa Forsyth in the north side of the bracket. They get the 42-12 win over Farmington, and they will travel to Rock Ridge. The Rockets pull out a 27-18 win over Bloomington Central Catholic. The interesting thing about that game, too, is obviously Bloomington Central Catholic primarily plays in a 3A conference, the Illini Prairie Conference, against teams like Monticello, Tolono Unity, both teams that we've seen in the state championship in the past few seasons here. And then we, obviously the front runner in the south of the 3A bracket this year is Prairie Central, who also comes out of that conference too. So a lot of people weren't talking a lot about Bloomington Central Catholic, especially entering the playoffs with the 6-3 mark. Obviously, they earned their right to be talked about. They got the close win over Mercer County, but Rock Ridge able to put up a 9-point win here to move on and play host to Maroa Forsyth, who a lot of people expect to see in Champaign. I know there's a lot of people that are looking for the potential opportunity to see a Macon County showdown between Maroa Forsyth and St. Teresa when we get to Champaign in a couple weeks. But there's still plenty of games to be played. Knoxville, the Blue Bullets get a 48-29 win over Bismarck, Henning, Rossville, Allen. Obviously, BHRA was the number 2 seed, undefeated at the time. Knoxville able to take them down in convincing fashion. Obviously, the game was close at half, but definitely the Blue Bullets broke it open in the second half, took control to fight their way into the quarterfinals. And then they are going to travel to Downs to play Tri-Valley. The 2015 state champions earned their way into the quarterfinals by taking down last year's state champion, the Wilmington Wildcats, 28-21. Obviously, we were very high on Tri-Valley at the beginning of the year. Definitely a team that we saw towards the upper ranks of Class 2A to begin the year. They had two blemishes as the season went on with losses to Ridgeview Lexington and then to Eureka. But here they are, making noise exactly the way that we thought, and now they get to host the quarterfinals against Knoxville. Looking at the South, we got a great matchup here with St. Teresa and Pana. St. Teresa comes in at 11-0. Pana comes in at 10-1. Pana's lone loss came back in week 1 to Vandalia. Obviously, it kind of put a little bit of a shadow on what we thought the Panthers would be for the season. They've shaken themselves out of that and have definitely turned some heads, especially later on as the regular season went on with their big win over North Mac, and they continue to be on a roll as they get by Fairfield 68-50. St. Teresa beat Athens in another big matchup that we thought would actually be somewhat closer, especially as Athens had that close battle with Maroa Forsyth back in week 9 where they lost 36-34. St. Teresa comes out with a 59-33 win there. So this one will be played in Decatur at St. Teresa. Pana, St. Teresa, quarterfinals. In my personal opinion, I feel that the winner of this game is the team that you're going to see in Champaign the Friday after Thanksgiving. So, very, very good to see. The next game would be Johnston City, who is 11-0. They come out of the Black Diamond Conference. The Black Diamond Conference does not typically have a good football history, so to speak. Johnston City has been a tough team. A lot of people had them, in the votes to be ranked, but not truly being ranked. In fact, in our NUICfootball.com rankings, they sat in others to receive votes for a good portion of the season. It took them a little while because I wasn't myself, along with my panel members, weren't 100% sure what we would see out of Johnson City. In fact, I thought that White County was actually a better team, but that proved to be otherwise as Johnson City was able to beat White County, and then White County eventually would go on to lose to another team as well down there. So Johnson City's here, but the real surprise is Althoff Catholic out of Belleville. That first round win over Shelbyville was definitely a bracket buster for most, as a lot of people had Shelbyville making it to the quarterfinals and even the semifinals. They beat Shelbyville 38-34 back in round 1. Which set up a matchup with Redbud, which surprisingly Redbud got what I feel was an upset win, although seeding-wise it wasn't an upset win, but they beat Nashville, and the Hornets had been in the state championship each of the last 2 years. A lot of people down that way were talking up Nashville again, despite some hiccups early in the season that gave them a couple losses on their record. Obviously, a lot of people felt that Nashville was definitely still a team to reckon with, and but Redbud pull off the upset there to create this quarterfinal showdown. And quite honestly, in picking that game, despite Althoff Catholic being the 14th seed, I definitely felt that they were the favorite over Redbud, in which they proved that with a 26-14 win. So Johnson City will play host in this game, with the winner taking on the winner of St. Teresa and Pana next week for a chance at state. Over in Class 3A, obviously the game that we're going to focus on the most is that of Reed Custer versus Dupec. Dupec, obviously one of our NUIC teams, and unfortunately came out on the bottom end of this one, 24-6. But you got to take a look at some of the takeaways here. This was the first game in 11 games that Reed Custer did not put up a running clock. It also proved that DUPEC was more than formidable to play with some of the teams that are slated to be playing later in the season. I know a lot of people have Reed Custer picked to get to state. After this game, a lot of people are starting to wonder if Reed Custer has the ability to beat Byron, who they will play in the quarterfinals. And I will be quick to remind you that these two teams met in the quarterfinals just a season ago. Byron won 28-24. So, do not overlook Reed Custer. Don't think that they don't have a shot in this game, because that's clearly incorrect. I think what you need to do is take a look at where DUPEC really is and realize that they probably put up a much larger fight than what many expected, including myself. At the same token, it's a hats off, tip of the cap type moment to Coach Hoffman and his staff for what they were able to do, being undermanned, missing a couple guys that were out in this game, with both Nathan Folk and Jalen Now being absent from the game, and then losing quarterback Cooper Hoffman late in the second quarter. And on the same play, they lost Caden Degner as well, due to a late hit incident on Cooper Hoffman that then resulted in Caden Degner retaliating on the player, which led to his dismissal from the game. So, either way, great effort, great fight. Obviously, this game was 16-6. Reed Custer put up their final touchdown with 35 seconds left in the game. Didn't really need to score. Don't know the circumstances around why they punched it in. Not a big deal either way, in my personal opinion, because the score is still a respectable one. But Reed Custer gets that win, 24-6, and I threw it out there on Twitter. I threw it out there on Facebook. Those that continue to say that DUPEC cannot compete in Class 3A, I'm sorry, you are incorrect. You are incorrect. If this were a 1 through 32 field and DUPEC had the ability to play some of these other teams that they don't get paired up with on a regular basis, even if they were to be one seed different either direction, we're looking at a potential of DUPEC being a potential quarterfinalist already. And in my opinion, DUPEC has proven what they're doing. They're still a team that's in infancy. They're building a foundation. The walls are going up, and they're doing it the right way, and they deserve that respect from everybody. And I don't care what conference you play in. The NUIC has proven. The NUIC has proven to be able to compete 1A through 3A, top tier to top tier, without a doubt. So the only teams that would be really of question would be the great IC Catholic teams that we've seen over the years. And, we got to watch DUPEC play IC Catholic just a season ago, and it was a 31-12 final there. But either way, Coach Hoffman's doing everything he can along with that staff, and they're going in the right direction. Other games that we're going to see, obviously, the North quarterfinals did break down as projected. So we see all four powers to be matching up in the quarterfinals. Princeton would get a 26-2 win over Genoa Kingston. That was a very tight battle, tighter than what that final score indicates for much of the game. But they do break out 26 points to win it, 26-2. They will move on to play host to IC Catholic, who gets the 42-14 win over Stillman Valley. Obviously, Stillman Valley beat Byron back in week 1. If you had to ask me, I think Byron right now is playing much better than they were back in week 1. And quite honestly, I would pick Byron over Stillman Valley at this moment in time. Rivalry games, especially week 1 rivalry games, are awesome because it gets the hysteria going to start the season, but you can't really base much off of week one because you don't know how your newer kids are going to adjust to such a big game atmosphere like that. And obviously, it was a great game, a 15-7 game to speak of, but Byron's definitely been rolling on all cylinders as of late. Not overly surprised by the score, but it was a much closer score for the majority of the game. IC Catholic did hold a 15-14 lead and then broke free there later in the second half to break away for that 42-14 final. So obviously the Cardinals definitely played tough, but IC Catholic just had a little bit more in reserve, especially in the fourth quarter, to pull away in that one. Byron gets the 56-21 win over Seneca. Again, not surprised there. I felt that Seneca was an overrated 9-0 team. I was asked before the playoffs began who I felt could be a potential upset in round one. I did pick Winnebago to upset Seneca. Obviously, that did not happen. Seneca won that game by 4 touchdowns, but not surprised by the way Byron took care of the Fighting Irish here, as I just didn't see a whole lot out of Seneca that said that they were great. Obviously, they were a team that was like 4-5 or 5-4 a year ago. So, I mean, the turnaround that the Fighting Irish have had is definitely excellent, and it's what you need in order to take the next steps as you continue to grow. A 10-0 season, I believe, is one of their best seasons they've ever had. Obviously, it ends at 10-1 now, but Byron will go on to play host to Reed Custer. Down in the South bracket, again, most of the teams we expect to see here are here, with the exception of one, and that is St. Joseph Ogden. Olympia got the upset win of Benton in round one, 32-21, and that was definitely a surprise. Not saying that Olympia is not good. They come out of a very good Sangamo conference. So it's a conference that definitely puts you up to the test when you got to go up against the Williamsvilles, the Murrow, Forsyth, and the Athens on regular basis. You know, we've seen Pleasant Plains in recent years have some successful teams as well. But when you're consistently going up against teams that make deep runs in the playoffs, such as Athens, Murrow, Forsyth, and Williamsville, iron sharpens iron, and here we are looking at Olympia as they got that upset win against Benton, and then they get the matchup with St. Joe Ogden at home, and they run away with it 60-28 to set up a rematch with Williamsville in the quarterfinals. And once again, they are going to be the host team, as Williamsville's already had 2 home games compared to Olympia's 1. So Olympia firing on all cylinders right now, and Williamsville gets the 18-16 win over Eureka. I'm really perplexed by that score. Obviously, I've talked to a lot of people through Twitter that have been on me about Williamsville. I have the utmost respect for Coach Coons and what the Bullets staff and the team does. Obviously, they're a very exceptional team. I have great respect for the Sangamo Conference. I enjoy watching that conference play. But at the same token, you know, I said it last year, and I'll say it. I did say it again this year. While we are looking at 2 Sangamo teams here in the quarterfinals, and one's going to definitely reach the semifinals, and we saw Murrow Forsyth set themselves up in the quarterfinals as well. So that's 3 teams in the quarterfinals. Something just doesn't seem to be clicking with me when it comes to what these top teams are doing. There's just something missing there. I don't have the warm and fuzzies over the Sangamo Conference this year as I have had in years past. Like, I feel like they have somewhat of a slight downward trend going. You know, that game with Eureka, obviously, you got to take a look. High winds, I get it. It takes a lot away from what Williamsville likes to do. But as I always say, in the month of November, run teams win when you get into November football. With that, you got to be able to do more than just rely on the pass. And obviously, we've talked about Williamsville having the quarterback Jake Seaman, with pretty much the majority of the offense runs through him, through ground and through the air, mostly through the air, as they run a spread style offense that does a lot of good things out of it, but they're definitely looking for quick hitting plays, QB options, stuff like that. But taking a look back at this matchup, these two teams met back in week 4, where Williamsville won 42-14. So they got a chance to redeem themselves. That win over Eureka, while it's a good win, and Eureka is definitely a tough team to play against, Eureka also lost to Class 1A Ridgeview Lexington, so by a larger score than that. So this is where I go off and I say the top of Class 1A, I don't care what people think, they can compete with some other teams in 2A and 3A as well. So say what you want, I don't care. Because I know what I see, and I talk on what I see, and it's good. This is excellent, especially for the Sangamo. And obviously, in the other game with Prairie Central and Tolono Unity got to the state championship a year ago, where they lost to Byron. Prairie Central was actually in the north part of the bracket last year. They lost to Princeton in the second round, before Princeton lost to IC Catholic in the quarterfinals. So great matchups all the way around. 3A definitely breaking out the way that we thought it would. We have 7 of the 8 best teams in 3A in the quarterfinals. This bracket, we said, was going to be fire from the get-go, and it is. Obviously, Olympia is taking a Cinderella story and putting the glass slippers on. Maybe that slipper stays on for another week, and maybe the clock hits 12 o'clock and it's the end of the run, but we shall see. But interesting matchups all the way around 1A through 3A. In the 8-man division for the NUIC, we see 2 teams reach the semifinals. Last year we had 3 teams in the semifinals, but this year we get 2 teams. Still a great thing, as the new division alignment definitely showcased that the North 2 division was the toughest division. Obviously, I think if Milledgeville potentially had a different seed and stayed away from West Central a little bit longer, we could be talking about that 3-team semifinal matchup. But either way, like Class 3A, the 8-man bracket has definitely showcased the top teams. Obviously, we had all chalk win through the first round, but going into the quarterfinals, we definitely saw some upsets here, and we'll run through those. Obviously, the number 1 seed through the entire playoffs was Decatur Lutheran. They lost to Champaign St. Thomas More 44-38 to give the Sabres their first crack at the I8FA semifinals, and they are going to go on the road to Amboy. The Clippers return to the semifinals for the second year in a row as they get some revenge. They lost to MCP in week 4, 40-30. They get that game and they win it 30-28 to bring the semifinals back to the harbor. And obviously, we're going to discuss this game further in detail as we get going throughout the show. But big big things going on for Amboy, and a good opportunity for them to play St. Thomas More with the shot at state on the line. Down in the south part of the bracket, well, the bottom side of the bracket, I should say, because there is no south, but West Central moves into the semifinals as they beat Milledgeville in another rematch. Game definitely had a much lower score this time around. The results pretty much the same. West Central wins 38-14, so that's a 24-point differential. That is the closest game that West Central has had all season, and still a 24-point win over a very tough Milledgeville team. And, West Central is a lot of people's favorite to be crowned champion here in 2 weeks when we get to Monmouth College. And they are definitely a team to watch. Very explosive, very good, very disciplined. But they get to go on the road for another semifinal rematch with Polo. Polo beat Ridgewood 38-32, and this will set up the rematch from last year's semifinal game, and where Polo definitely walked away with that one in a big win there. So I believe that final score was 50-14. So would not be surprised if West Central would want to turn that score around. Obviously, we saw these two teams also meet up in the COVID spring season, and West Central pretty much wiped the floor with the Marcos that year. But you're looking at two coaches that are very well prepared, very good at game planning. Obviously, Coach Ted Alston from Polo is considered like the godfather of 8-man football, and you got Jason Kirby on the other side of the field who has done a great job, not just adapting to the 8-man game, but taking his style of offense and incorporating it into the 8-man style game. And then on top of that, he's put together a great staff. We've seen that Hall of Fame coach Jim Unruh's been tagging along at different times with him as well. So obviously he's getting some good insight there. And likewise, you should. I mean, if you got the people there to help you make better plans, you take all the advantages you can get. But West Central will go to Polo for this game, giving us some great semifinal matchups, and we will break those down here in a little bit as we get ready to talk about our NUIC games right now. All right, we're going to start in 8-man and taking a look at how each of these teams break out. Obviously, the new set of ratings are out. Once week 9 is done, we no longer do state rankings because you can't rank teams any more than what you already have once teams start falling out of the playoff outlook. But the ratings continue to be fluid because not all games are ended and teams are continually shifting around to see how the final rating will look once all games are complete. And with that, as stated before, we definitely saw a peak where the North 2 division, known as the NUIC division, has definitely proven its capabilities. They've won back-to-back state championships, both those coming via Polo. We saw Orangeville in the state championship a year ago in that close loss to Polo as well. Amboy obviously being in the semifinals against Orangeville. But the number one team coming into the semifinal round remains West Central, as they have a rating of 27.9. A strength of schedule, which isn't very tough. Opponents win-loss record at 49-56. But all you got to do is take a look at the outcomes and the games that they've played and won. including 2 wins over Milledgeville and a win over Amboy already. So it's clearly safe to say that West Central is the number 1 team. Number 2 team is Polo. Ironically, Polo's 2 losses are to the 2 teams that West Central has already beat, Amboy and Milledgeville. Polo obviously 9-2, rating of 15.3, strength of schedule with an opponent record of 55 and 51, gives them about the 4th toughest or 5th toughest schedule to date. So Polo obviously did not have quite the schedule as some others, but still a very competitive schedule to say the least. Number 3 is Amboy, also at 9-2. Well, how can Amboy be lower than Polo when Amboy beat Polo? Well, 1, that game came back in week 1. 2, Amboy did lose to Milford Cisna Park. Now they've beat Milford Cisna Park, which has definitely catapulted Amboy up these ratings as well. As I had said, that as long as they beat MCP, we should see them rise back up, and they did. But that loss that MCP had to St. Thomas More was a bad loss as far as ratings are concerned. And when you're looking at ratings don't care about who beat who in what week. They do take a look at who beat who and by what score differential, but it goes through the entire body of work. And obviously, Polo, in the eyes of the Freeman ratings, has a better body of work, and part of that's because they beat St. Thomas More 46-0. I mean, really, that's the biggest differentiator I can find between these, because if you take a look at the ratings, Amboy's not that far off from Polo either. Number 4 is Milledgeville. They are 7-4. Obviously, they lost last week to West Central. Definitely had the toughest schedule of anybody in the 8-man division, with an opponent's win-loss record of 70-32. Number 5 is Decatur Lutheran, who lost to St. Thomas More last week. They're 10-1 with a rating of 5.6. And then we have number 6, St. Thomas More, the last team in the semifinals, who, despite beating LSA, they are still rated behind LSA again for the same factors why Polo is above Amboy. LSA just has a much better body of work throughout the season. Granted, that one game has definitely pulled St. Thomas More up the ratings, because this is the first time we've seen them in the top 6. And they have a rating of 4.8 with an opponent's win-loss record of 64-44. So let's take a look at these games and break them down. Obviously, we're going to start with the big semifinal matchup between West Central and Polo. West Central comes in at 11-0, Polo at 9-2, and West Central beat Milledgeville 38-14 last week. Polo beat Ridgewood 38-32. Some common opponents that these teams have had on the season are Ridgewood, Milledgeville, Amboy, and Acquin. West Central is going to come into this game as a 12-point favorite, and obviously another interesting fact here is that West Central has beat all common opponents that Polo has had by an average of 32 points. So, players to watch for, obviously we have Brock Soto, who's ran for 2,180 yards and 35 touchdowns on the season. Caden Drosty, who I do not have updated stats on. I know he's got to be closing in on 3,000 yards on the season. I know he has over 45 touchdowns on the season. I have not received any updates on what his stats are for the season, but obviously he's doing big things for the Heat. With that, you got to take a look at Mason Carnes, who we continue to talk about. He as well has well over 800 yards rushing and over 16 touchdowns on the season. And Parker Meldrum, the fullback, I know he's over 700 yards, and I'm pretty sure he's right around 10 or maybe a little over 10 touchdowns on the season as well. So we saw some things change with how Polo ran their offense, basically moving into a wildcat offense right around week 5 after they started the season 2-2, and you know, Soto has definitely racked up the yards, but we're gonna have to see a little bit more in this game out of these guys, as uh, they're gonna come into this game a little banged up. Obviously, we have not seen Avery Grenoble in the playoffs, uh, unfortunately, and it's going to remain the same. He is unfortunately out for the season, and it's tough to see him have that happen to him, being a senior, a huge leader and difference maker on this team. But at the same time, we have to continue to move forward as well. Polo's going to have to continue to move forward. So, for West Central, obviously, in the passing game, Carnes is the quarterback. Biggest targets have been Bryce Bigger and Isaiah Steffson. And then you take a look at what Mason has done in the passing game. Obviously, effective. He's completing his passes at about a 66% clip, which is very good. He's right around 500 yards on the season, based off of what I see from where I had him heading into round 1. And at that time, he had 5 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, and I haven't seen anything that states otherwise. So obviously, very effective at what he does. And I like the way that Mason controls the offense. Does an absolute tremendous job as far as that's concerned. Taking a look at the defensive side, again, I don't have a whole lot here because I don't have a lot of the updates, but the defense is definitely led by Parker Meldrum, who at the time had 73 tackles entering the playoffs, followed by Caden Jossie, who has 66 tackles from his DB position. And, he just flies to the ball. It's just unbelievable how fast he is, how quick he can come up and ruin people's game plans. And then Colton Fletcher has had 59 tackles as we entered the playoffs as well. So some other key notable players obviously would be Isaiah Steffson, who had 35 tackles. We've seen Mason Carnes create some havoc on defense as well, and Landon Winter. So, defensively for Polo, we're looking at obviously Avery Grenoble, we've already talked about, won't be in this game. He was their leading tackler on the season. Brock Soto is second in tackles, has 72 entering this game. Dilo Fernandez will pick up on the offensive side of the ball in place of Grenoble, but he is also the third leading tackler on defense from his defensive tackle position. Caden Webster has 58 tackles as well. So, and then Brady Wolber is at 52 tackles. So Polo has experience. Obviously, they have kids that are going to still make plays. And, we continue to see what the Marcos can do. Obviously, a lot of people want to see how Polo can fare in this game, with West Central being the huge favorite. Taking a look at this matchup and how it breaks down, obviously I put the blurbs out there already on Facebook and Twitter, but this is the third trip to the playoffs for the West Central Heat. Their playoff record is 4-2. This is their second consecutive trip to the playoffs. They are also the second straight year that they're in the semifinals. They average 60.5 points per game while allowing 21.1 points per game for a 39-point margin of victory on average. Round one, they beat South Beloit 72-16, and round two, they beat Milledgeville 38-14. Taking on the defending two-time state champion Polo Marcos, coached by Ted Alston. They're back-to-back state champs with titles in 2019 and 2021 in the 8-man division. They come in with a playoff record of 18-22. They are making their 25th trip to the playoffs, fourth consecutive trip in the playoffs. This is the third consecutive year they have made the semifinals in the 8-man game. They are averaging 45.5 points per game while allowing 18.5 points per game for a scoring differential of 27 points per game. So round one, they beat Hiawatha 44-8. In round two, they beat Ridgewood 38-32. Again, a common opponent there for West Central is Ridgewood. And West Central won that game 66-34 in the regular season when those two teams met up. So either Ridgewood has definitely improved a lot since that game with West Central, which I believe they have, or West Central is just that much better than the rest of the field, which we've also seen with big margin of victory wins over Milledgeville and over Amboy late in the season. And obviously we just watched them play Milledgeville a week ago and pulled out another 3-touchdown win. So obviously the favorite in this game is going to be West Central. Statistically, they're a 12-point favorite through the rating system. Projection-wise, or my pick, I have West Central winning this game 52-26. So obviously for the West Central fans that watch us, you know, your Heat are doing great, and you're exciting team to watch. For my NUIC contingent and my Polo Marco fans, I really enjoy watching Polo play. Obviously, they've been a staple of the IAFA series since they joined back in 2019. Really enjoy watching what Coach Alston's able to do year in and year out with what he has available. And for Polo, hopefully we can see this be a closer game than what the projection is. Going to be a very cold game. Obviously, defensively, Polo's going to have to find ways to set the edge to keep Josty in check. I definitely believe that the size advantage on the line and in overall play is going to go to West Central in this game. And it's going to come down to who can win that line of scrimmage. I mean, I know it's cliche, but even in 8-man football, both these teams are clearly run-heavy teams. And when you have run games with running teams, you got to be able to win up front. And I give West Central the slight advantage there. Overall team speed, I feel, you're looking at two speedsters really in Drosty and Solto. Both are explosive players. Both are top leading rushers in 8-man. Definitely excited to see how this one can go. Obviously, I have West Central winning by 26 points, but anything can happen, and I'll definitely be in attendance for this one, at least to start the game, as I'm trying to pick up 2 games on the same weekend. But Polo is where I'm starting my Saturday off for the semifinals. Our next IAFA semifinal game takes us to Amboy, where the Clippers are 9-2. And they are going to play host to Champaign St. Thomas More, who comes in this game at 8-3. Amboy gets here by way of a 30-28 win over Milford Cisna Park. Champaign St. Thomas More upsets Decatur Lutheran 44-38 to make their first appearance in the IAFA semifinals. Obviously, common opponents for these two teams are Polo, Milledgeville, MCP, and Bushnell Prairie City. St. Thomas More lost to Polo 46-0, and then they lost to Milledgeville 46-6. Likewise, in comparison, Amboy beat Polo by 16 points, 28-12 back in week 1, and they beat Milledgeville by 4 points, 40-36 in week 3. So, obviously, taking a look at these or at this matchup, Amboy would come in as the likely favorite. Through the rating system, they enter this game as an 8-point favorite. And taking a look at what we expect to see out of these two teams, obviously St. Thomas More is definitely a team that likes to mix it up, run and pass. Led by running back Peace Boomba, who has 856 yards and 15 touchdowns on the season. Quarterback Matt DiLorenzo is coming back from an injury last season. He's definitely been a huge difference maker for the Sabres offense. He has 615 yards on the ground with 11 touchdowns. So those two pretty much lead the ground game for St. Thomas More. Likewise, on the other side, for Amboy, Landon Welchel has taken over the running back duties after some disciplinary actions earlier in the year or issues that Amboy had to battle against. But Welchel's definitely put up some big numbers as of late. Sits at 1,208 yards and 14 touchdowns, which is the it's up there as far as overall rushing yards. On my list, he's 7th, but I don't have all 8-man stats on me to make comparisons. But huge addition for the Clipper offense, and he's doing great things for Amboy. Quinn Leffelman is up to 650 yards and 10 touchdowns as well. And of course, we don't have a full season of statistical information for Tucker Lindenmeyer, as he missed 5 weeks of the season, but he'll enter this game with 291 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. So obviously, Amboy can get it going on the ground. Likewise, both these teams are going to get it going through the air as well. DiLorenzo for St. Thomas More has 1,197 yards passing with 18 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, 46% completion rate. So he does have some inconsistencies that may be able to help benefit Amboy at times. Lindenmeyer, last stated, missed 5 weeks of the season, so he has thrown for 651 yards with 10 touchdowns to 2 interceptions for a 57% clip. Taken over after Eddie Jones had helped lead Amboy to 547 yards passing and 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions at a 49% clip. So, even despite the absence of Lindenmeyer, Eddie Jones, the sophomore, was able to help keep Amboy afloat, keep the train chugging. And here we are with Amboy back in the semifinals. Obviously, the top target for Amboy is Brennan Blaine, who leads all of IAFA in receiving yards with 953 yards, 17 touchdowns, with an average of 28 yards per catch. For St. Thomas More, you're looking at Peace Boomba, who leads the team in receiving yards at 496 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Ben Horn adds another 460 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. And then August Christhelf has 122 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. So obviously, St. Thomas More's tendencies are to get the ball in the hands of Boomba, whether it be on the ground or through the air. Most likely, I'm assuming it's bubble routes, dump passes, stuff like that, just to get feet moving and everything else. Defensively, Amboy is I don't have their defensive stats, but obviously we talk about it a lot with the play of Leffelman and Blaine at their defensive end positions. Welcho's done an awesome job as far as making big plays. Linnemeyer back in the defensive backfield as well. And of course, there's some other guys up front. Trey Payne, Montavon, these guys are huge contributors that don't get a lot of recognition, and they're definitely a staple to what Amboy can do and has to do in order to make this game competitive. For St. Thomas More, obviously 2 of the 3 names that we've already mentioned are staples on the defensive side of the ball with Boomba and DiLorenzo. Boomba has 118 tackles on the season. DiLorenzo has 107 tackles, 4 interceptions, but they're led by linebacker Brody Cuppernell, who has 135 tackles, 10 tackles for a loss, and an interception as well. And then you got August Christelf with 86 tackles, 18 tackles for a loss, helping to lead this Sabres defense. And, one of the questions that was brought up by Mr. Cuppernell during our playoff show was, do we feel that St. Thomas More has one of the best defenses? And clearly we had Tyler Murdian on the show with us, who definitely felt that St. Thomas More does have a good defense. But we do see lapses in that defense, as I mentioned, the 46-point loss and 40-point loss to Milledgeville and Polo. And, either way, they play a very good style of football. Definitely excited to see how this goes on. Taking a look at this matchup, the Sabres come in with an 8-3 record, coached by Nathan Watson. They come out of the Central 1 division. They've never made it to the state finals. Their playoff record is 7-10. This is their 11th trip to the playoffs. Their second consecutive trip. They lost in the first round a season ago. On the season, they averaged 30.9 points per game, while allowing 25.6 points per game for a differential of 5 points per game. Round 1, they beat Pawnee 52-8. In round 2, they upset Decatur Lutheran 44-38. Taking a look at Amboy, they come out of the North 2 division as discussed. They come into this game with a 9-2 record. Head coach is Scott Payne, who's in his 3rd year. In the 11-man game, Amboy won a state title in 1984. They are also state runner-up in 1979 and 1980. Had to type out on the blurb that I sent out earlier this week, so hopefully nobody actually caught that. But I did not get it updated and fixed. They have a playoff record of 30-19. 21st trip to the playoffs. This is their second consecutive trip to the semifinals. They come into this game averaging 40.7 points per game while allowing 21.1 points per game for a differential of 19 points. They get here by way of a round 1 win over Blue Ridge 48-0 and a round 2 win over Milford Cisna Park 30-28. Obviously, MCP was a heavy favorite for many to potentially get to the state championship game, and Amboy obviously took that opportunity to beat them. They did enter that game as a 5-point favorite on the road and come out with a 2-point win. So they made good on the projections. But Amboy will come in this game as the favorite by 8 points. My prediction or projection of this game, just taking a look at overall scores, overall play, I have Amboy winning this game 40-20. All right, as we move over to the 11-man side, we've talked about how great the NUIC is over the years. Obviously, they've put up a 15-2 record in state championship games since 2003. just since 2010, they have won every Class 1A state championship with the exception of 2012, where they did get runner-up as Stockton was the team representative there, and 2015, where Stark County was the North representative that lost to Arcola in the 2015 state title game. Outside of that, 2010, Lena Winslow, 2011, Dakota, 2013, Lena Winslow, 2014, Forreston, 2016, Forreston, 2017, Lena Winslow, 2018, Forreston, 2019, Lena Winslow, and 2021, Lena Winslow. With that, like stated before in the preview part of the show, the NUIC heavily talked about as the kings of Class 1A, deservedly so, clearly showing in their ability to win state championships, taking a look at 2003, 2005, 2007, and then, as stated, 2010, 11, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21. Lots of history coming out of this conference. Obviously, the 4 teams that we have remaining have combined for 13 state championships in the history of IHSA football. You have Lena Winslow making their 14th trip to the quarterfinals. Fulton is making their 10th trip to the quarterfinals. Forreston their 11th trip, and Dakota making their 6th trip to the quarterfinals. Fulton with 2 state titles. Forreston and Dakota have 3 state titles. Lena Winslow with 5 state titles. So, taking a look at how the ratings look, Lena Winslow been number 1 all season long, still remain number 1 with a 35.5 rating. Opponent win-loss record of 54 and 55. Number 2 are the Fulton Steamers, and I remember talking to Coach Lower back in week 5 after his team had just taken a loss to Lena Winslow 54-32, and I said, I told him then, I said, I really feel that Fulton is the second best team in Class 1A, and here we are going into week 12, and at this moment in time, Fulton is showing that they possibly are the second best team in Class 1A. Their rating is 24.8, and they are the second highest rated team in Class 1A. Opponents win-loss record is 61 and 50. For the longest time, they had definitely the toughest schedule. If you take a look at the regular season, definitely the toughest schedule. But it is now the second toughest schedule overall, with the playoffs included, only behind conference team member Forreston. Number 3 is Ridgeview Lexington. They come in at 11-0 with a rating of 22.0. Opponents win-loss record of 55 and 48. Obviously, Ridgeview Lexington getting pushed down into the 1A South quickly became the favorite in 1A South, as they are a team that made the semifinals last year, where they lost to Lena Winslow 28-12 on a surprising run. To be honest, they entered the playoffs last year at 5-4. This year, they've done everything that we expect them to do as far as record-wise, but still, there's a lot of questions that remain as far as how good they truly are. At the beginning of the year, I heard that they returned everybody, and then later on, I take a look, and yeah, they returned Caden Farrell and Logan Friedmansky, but they did lose quite a bit as well. They didn't actually return everybody off of last year's team, but Hal Kyoto is a great coach, done great things over the years. Definitely has this team firing on all cylinders, right where they need to be, and with that, they are in control of their own destiny, so to speak, and have a great opportunity to make a rematch with Lena Winslow or another NUIC opponent in Champaign in a couple weeks here. Number 4 is Forreston. They enter this week at 7-4 with a rating of 21.2. Toughest strength of schedule out of all of the teams in Class 1A. Opponents win-loss record of 65 and 44. Number 5 is Camp Point Central, who is 11-0 coming out of the WIVC. They have a rating of 19.6. Opponents win-loss record of 47-61. So definitely a much weaker strength of schedule. Number 6 is Greenfield Northwestern, who comes in at 10-1 with a rating of 14.1 and an opponent's win-loss record of 45-62. And at number 7 is Dakota at 7-4 with a rating of 12.5. The third toughest schedule in all of Class 1A, with the opponent's win-loss record of 61-47. Number 8 is Chicago Hope, who we saw lose to Forreston. They are 10-1 with a rating of 9.4. Marquette lost to Dakota last week. They are number 9 at 8-2 with a rating of 8.6. And at number 10 is our final quarterfinalist, Tuscola, who enters this week at 9-2 with a rating of 6.0 and opponent's win-loss record of 61-47. But the strength of schedule, despite the win-loss record, is definitely lower for the Warriors. So that gives you a look at what we're looking at rankings-wise for Class 1A. All right, our first game that we're going to talk about is Dakota at Forreston. Dakota comes in with a 7-4 record. Likewise, Forreston comes in with the exact same record. Dakota gets here by win over Marquette 30-19. Forreston beats Hope 44-16. These two teams met back up in week 4 where Dakota won 34-28, and that was the talk around the conference as they pulled out a huge last second win to take down the Cardinals in Dakota. These two teams last met in the 2018 quarterfinals, where Forreston won this game 22-20 en route to their third state championship. And Forreston is going to enter this game as a 9-point favorite. Obviously, the Cardinals are led by the running of fullback Johnny Kobler. The converted lineman turns into a running back for his senior year, has put up 1,296 yards on the season, second leading rusher in the NUIC, 21 touchdowns, which is also second in the NUIC behind A.J. Mulcahy and Gage Dunker. Helping out the ground game is going to be Caleb Sanders. The senior has rushed for 857 yards and 12 touchdowns on the season. They also get help from Micah Nelson, who is back from injury. Hasn't done a whole lot since coming back, but he has 513 yards and 7 touchdowns. And then Q Frederick has 336 yards on the ground with a touchdown, and McKeon Crace has 366 yards rushing with 5 touchdowns. Brock Smith is the quarterback. He's rushed the ball 40 times for 305 yards and 5 touchdowns as well. As far as the passing game goes, well, when you're talking about Forreston, what passing game? Obviously, they have thrown the ball a little bit. Brock Smith has thrown for 184 yards with 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions with a 33% completion percentage. So Forreston's definitely not going to throw the ball very much. And as far as receptions go, his leading receiver is Caleb Sanders with 88 yards and a touchdown, followed by Micah Nelson with 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the offensive side of the ball for the Indians, they are led by Adrian Ariano, who has rushed for 946 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. And then you got the power running from fullback Tommy Bowman, who has put up 622 yards on the ground with 12 touchdowns. Obviously, we've seen Connor Matthews play a big role, especially in that game against Marquette. He has ran for 272 yards and 4 touchdowns on the season. And Caden Niedermeyer has added 297 yards and 5 touchdowns from the quarterback position. And then Reed Wales has also been getting quite a few carries as of late with 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. Passing-wise, Niedermeyer has thrown for 1,126 yards on the season, second best in the NUIC, 13 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, a completion percentage of 54%. His primary targets are Ariano with 595 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns, who is currently second in the NUIC in receiving yards, and Tug Dornick, who is right behind him, fourth in the conference with 403 yards receiving with 1 touchdown. So Dakota obviously is going to look to get the ball moving on the ground. They will go to the air if needed and can do so effectively. Forreston obviously looking to go to the ground. Do not go to the air very much. Have not been nowhere as effective as Dakota through the air. Taking a look at the defensive leaders of both of these teams. Obviously, Dakota is led by linebackers Tommy Bowman and Adrian Ariano. Bowman has 72 tackles on the season. Ariano has 67 tackles on the season. And then you got Reed Wales in there with 63 tackles. Connor Matthews at his defensive line position has 55 tackles. And then Case Rocky at cornerback has 51 tackles. For the Cardinals, they are led by Alex Raya from his cornerback position with 90 tackles. Quentin Frederick at linebacker has 61 tackles. Micah Nelson at the other linebacker has 51 tackles. And then you have Johnny Kobler at linebacker with 41 tackles. Kobler also can go in, play defensive end as well. Caleb Sanders, cornerback, 39 tackles. Kyler Gans on the defensive line has 38 tackles. And McKeon Crace in the defensive backfield also with 38 tackles. So, Forreston gets a lot of contributions from the defensive backfield just from the style of defense that they play. Typically, they play a 4-3 defense. For DBs, and they're looking to set the edge and shut the gaps. Taking a look at this matchup, Dakota obviously, like I said, come in with a 7-4 record, the 11 seed in the North bracket. They are coached by Dan Sheets, who is in his first year. Dakota has won state titles in 2005, 2007, and 2011. 2011 being another year where Dakota met up with Forreston in the quarterfinals. Dakota coming out on top in that one, 16-9. Playoff record for the Indians is 28-21. They are making their 25th trip to the playoffs. This is the first time they've been in the playoffs since 2018. On the season, they are scoring on average 34.3 points per game while allowing 26.2 points per game for a differential of 8 points. They got here with a round 1 win over Iroquois West 16-14 and a round 2 win over Marquette 30-19. Forreston comes in also at 7-4 with the 10 seed. Head coach is Keenan Janicki in the second year. Forreston has won state titles in 2014, 2016, 2018. Playoff record of 36-23. 27th trip to the playoffs, making their 12th consecutive trip. Averaging 37.3 points per game on the season while allowing 21.2 points per game on the season for a 16-point differential, which kind of gives way to how they are a 9-point favorite in this game. They got here by round 1 win over St. Bede 46-22 and then a round 2 win over Chicago Hope 44-16. Obviously, like I said, these two met in week 4 where Dakota won 34-28. Forreston comes into this game at home as a 9-point favorite. The projection states that Forreston should win 35-21 or by way of 14 points. However, if you take a look historically, these two teams are usually separated by 8 points or less. Taking a look at game day temperatures for Saturday, it's going to be blistering cold. Game time temps around 35 to 37 degrees with a nice 16 to 20 mile an hour wind, which is definitely going to bring that field temperature down to the low 20s. So it's going to be a cold Saturday. And with that, you're going to see more things. And, taking a look at how these two teams break down defensively, I feel that Dakota is definitely stronger in the pass defense part of it, especially going up against what the Forreston offense wants to do, which is primarily run. What the Indians will need to do is they definitely have to stop Johnny Kobler. If they cannot stop the inside trap game and dive game from going in Forreston's favor, it's going to be a long day for the Indians. Likewise, they're going to have to play sound, fundamental, discipline at home football. They're going to have to attack the edge. They cannot sit back and let Crace and Sanders get to the outside on 5-yard carries. They have to attack the edge when they see the ball going to the outside. They have to play gap responsibility. Likewise, offensively, they're going to want to get the ball going on the fullback dives with Bowman and Matthews. You're going to want to get the ball in Ariano's hands any way possible. Hopefully they can open up the run game to get the pass game going to make this game even more intriguing. And they're definitely going to have to utilize their speed, and they're going to have to play tough up front for sure. Likewise, on the other side of the ball for Forreston, they definitely want to get Kobler going. They want to be able to get to the outside with Crace and Sanders, utilize Q Frederick wherever they can. Defensively, their 4-3 defense that they're accustomed to being in should be a good fit to help balance out what Dakota wants to do between pass and run. But, Dakota does do a good job with play action. And if they get sucked in on play action dives, that would be a prime moment for Dakota to go over top to tug or run a wheel route or throw Ariano out in a flanker position and kind of go deep that route. So obviously there's a lot of options here for both these teams to find success. A huge matchup in this game, to say the least. But my pick to win, Forreston has owned Dakota ever since the 2015 playoffs, where Forreston won 8-0 in the first round in the rain. I'm going with Dakota in this game. I think that while they're not the favorite and they're the underdog in this game, I feel that Dakota has the ability to make some more noise. A win for the Indians also puts them at home in the semifinals for the first time since 2005, where Dakota beat Auburn in those playoffs back then. So there's a lot at store here for the Indians. I like Dakota in this game, 28-24. All right, our last matchup takes us to Fulton, where the Steamers come in at 9-2. They are going to play host to Lena Winslow, who comes in at 11-0. Lena Winslow beats Rova Williamsfield 76-7. Fulton beat Rockford Lutheran 28-0. These two met up in week 5, where Lena Winslow won 54-32. Lena Winslow was down 19-16 with 4:52 remaining in the first half, but they did hold a 24-19 lead at halftime before they opened up a big third quarter that saw them put up 22 points to take a commanding, or 26 points to take a commanding. I'm sorry, it wasn't that. They did score 3 touchdowns, though, to take a big lead over Fulton that definitely led to the 54-32 final. One of the biggest takeaways out of that game was that Fulton never stopped fighting despite getting behind by a larger deficit than what they wanted to be behind. And they continued to play that way throughout. That was one of the biggest takeaways I took out of that game, especially watching the way that leaders for Fulton were definitely time these two teams met were in the quarterfinals, where Lena Winslow won 54 to 28. This is three games in a row in 2 seasons that they have played. All 3 games have seen Lena Winslow put up 54 points, but as each game progresses, Fulton has scored more points, from 7 to 28 and now 32. Lena Winslow is going to come into this game as an 11-point favorite. Taking a look at the players to watch in this game, obviously, for the Panthers, they are led by Gunnar Lobdell, who has ran for 1,231 yards and 18 touchdowns. And then they follow that up with fullback Gage Dunker, who has ran for 1,015 yards and 23 touchdowns. And then you add the speedster to Jake Zeal, who has added 869 yards and 12 touchdowns. Passing-wise, well, Lena Winslow doesn't pass much, and as Mitch Stormer would say, the less passing, the better. So Lena Winslow has thrown the ball 12 times on the season through Drew Streckwald, who has completed 50% of his passes for 225 yards and 5 touchdowns. If you remember correctly, 3 of those touchdowns came against Dakota back in their Week 2 matchup. So far to date, Dakota's really been the only team that has been able to put a little bit of a stop to what Lena Winslow's rushing attack has been and force them to go to the air. So, there's always that to look at as well. Receiving-wise, for the Panthers, Jace Flynn obviously is their leading receiver. He has 2 catches. Those 2 catches coming in that game against Dakota for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, for the Fulton Steamers, on the ground, they are led by Lucas Schroeder, who has 770 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns. Ryan Eads adds another 608 yards and 9 touchdowns. And then Joel Ford has definitely been getting some of the workload as of late with 300 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Passing-wise, is the NUIC leader in passing, Braden Dykstra. The QB is thrown for 1,414 yards with 16 touchdowns to 6 interceptions with a completion percentage of 59%. Obviously, his leading target is first team all-conference member Balin Damoff, who has 603 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. Eads has added another 380 yards and 4 touchdowns on the receiving side of the ball, and Ethan Price has hauled in 10 passes for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, obviously the defense, I don't have any of the statistical information for Lena Winslow, as I had incomplete data, so I've never put it together. I will go back with Coach Aaron when I have time and get the complete stats for the defensive side of the ball. But they are led by Defensive Player of the Year of the NUIC, and that is linebacker Gunnar Lobdell. Obviously, you got the play of Gage Dunker at defensive end. The other defensive end is Mason Smith. And then you got line play from Sam Pecoraro as well. And then you can't forget Jake Tippett and Henry Engel. That definitely helped shore up that defensive line. Jake Zeal obviously is helping to lead the defensive backfield along with Aiden Packard, who is one of the leaders in interceptions for the Panthers. So, while I don't have the stats, obviously we have the players to watch on the defensive side of the ball. And, Lena Winslow gets after it defensively. They're going to attack you up front. They want to put pressure on you on the quarterback. They want to suffocate the pocket. They do a great job as far as staying on their pass patterns. Linebackers do a great job of trying to read quarterback. That way, when he gets flushed from the pocket, he's still primarily contained to the line of scrimmage. So very sound team. Obviously, you expect that out of the two-time state champs. Who obviously have won 5 state titles over the past 12 seasons, trying to gun for their 7th state or their 6th state title. And likewise, they're the number 1 ranked team in state, have been all year, so they've held that from start to finish so far. Big things there. For the Steamers, they are led by Zane Panel on the defensive line. 124 tackles, 14 tackles for a loss, 6 fumble recoveries. Linebacker Connor Sheridan heads 119 tackles with 5 interceptions. Joel Ford, also another linebacker, adds 116 tackles, 17 tackles for loss. Ben Fosdick adds another 102 tackles with 3 interceptions. And then you have Ethan Price with 86 tackles on the season. Dakin Pessman and Braden Damoff are other stalwarts that we see on the defense for the Steamers. Each have 78 tackles and 73 tackles, respectively. Damoff is a huge piece of that defensive line. Does a great job there as well. Taking a look at the matchups. Obviously, Lena Winslow comes in with an 11-0 mark. They are the number 1 seeded team in the 1A North bracket. Head coach is Rick Arend. State titles 2010, 2013, 2017, 2019, 2021. So obviously, Lena Winslow is the Alabama of the SEC and the NUIC, and clearly have shown that through as of late. Playoff record 50-22. Last week's win over Rova Williamsfield has set the NUIC mark for most team playoff wins in NUIC history. They're making their 28th trip to the playoffs. This is their 23rd consecutive trip to the playoffs. In Rick Arend's 26 years, he's made the playoffs 25 times. The only year he's missed was his second year back in 1998 with a team that did go 6-3 but missed out on playoff points. The Panthers have scored 52.7 points per game on average while allowing 11.1 points per game average with a margin of victory of 41 points per game. Round 1, they beat Richards 48-6. Round 2, they beat Rova Williamsfield 76-7 to put up the second 69-point differential game we've seen so far this season in the Class 1A playoffs. Fulton comes in this game with the 4 seed and a 9-2 record. They are coached by Patrick Lower in his 16th year at the helm. They've won state titles in 1976 and 1991. They have a playoff record of 26-20, making their 23rd trip to the playoffs, their 6th consecutive trip. They averaged 35.1 points per game while allowing 16.5 points per game defensively for a 19-point differential on average. Round 1, they beat Aurora Christian 38-13, and round 2, they get the win over Rockford Lutheran 28-0. Taking a look at this game, obviously Lena Winslow comes in as the favorite, as an 11-point favorite. Projection-wise, Lena Winslow is projected to win 42-24. Week 5, Lena Winslow won 54-32, and as I stated, looking to have some cold temperatures over the weekend. While it's nice and balmy right now on Wednesday night, Saturday morning's not going to feel so balmy. And with that, when temperatures get colder, we typically see the scores come down. It's kind of ironic that Lena Winslow has put up 54 points in 3 consecutive contests against Fulton. That's not a likely trend, and I don't see that trend continuing. I do feel that Lena Winslow is still a favorite in this game. And I would definitely be remiss to say that they're my pick to win, obviously, because I have them picked as my state champion. So my prediction of this game is Lena Winslow 44 and Fulton 24. I just think that I think that this game can definitely be closer than that. I think Fulton has shown ways to match up with Lena Winslow. Again, as I stated back in week 5 in this game, Fulton's going to have to come in this game. They're going to have to match the intensity. And then when they get to the second half, they're going to have to keep that intensity going in order to give themselves an opportunity. On the other side of the ball, Lena Winslow has to come in. They cannot overlook the Steamers. We've seen this trend play out in the past where, Forreston in 2018, they come in, they get that big, huge win over Aurora Christian. They host Forreston at home, and they come up with the loss in a season where a lot of people still feel that they should have been the state champs. So woulda, coulda, shouldas, but at the same time, it tells you you can never overlook an opponent despite what you've done to them earlier in the season. Obviously, as shown, the second year always tends to prove, or the second meeting always tends to prove to be a tougher meeting. We saw that last year with these two teams where Lena Winslow won the first matchup 54-7. In the playoffs, they won 54-28. Granted, Lena Winslow was never out of control in that game and probably let off the hammer a little bit sooner to conserve players and energy, being that late in the season and trying to stay healthy for a deeper playoff run, which ultimately led to a state championship game for the Panthers. So, my pick to win is Lena Winslow. All right, that gives you a look at what we have seen as far as our 8-man and our Class 1A playoff matches. Obviously, 8-man in the NUI or in the semifinals with the shot to go to state. We have two teams there in Polo and Amboy. Class 1A, we're in the quarterfinals. Definitely guaranteed a spot at state in Champaign. Yes, Greg Armstrong, my rooms are booked. They've been booked since September. But here we go. All 4 teams in the Class 1A quarterfinals are from the NUIC. Great matchups, rematches on the docket. Obviously, Dakota Forreston is definitely the headliner for the week as they played out to a 34-28 win for Dakota back in week 4. We see Lena Winslow and Fulton match up in the quarterfinals for the second consecutive year. Fulton consistently trying to close that gap on Lena Winslow as far as overall score. Again, looking at a very brisk and cold Saturday afternoon. All of these games start between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know I get asked a lot about streams. All you got to do is go on nfhsnetwork.com, search for the host school, and if they have NFHS, which most of them do, click on the link and it should pull up the game for you. It is a paid subscription. Also, being that it's the quarterfinal rounds, admission is through digital ticketing, but from what I've understand is that all sites will receive cash on hand. I'm not sure what the gate ticket price is for the 8-man game. I know for the IHSA, digital ticketing is $7 a ticket. And if you pay cash on hand at the field, it's $8 a ticket. But I know some places are not doing cash. They are going cashless. Both Fulton and Forreston are accepting cash, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's going to be a fun weekend of quarterfinal action. With it, we're in mid-November. Expect colder conditions. This is what November football is like. And being from the Northwest Upstate Illini Conference, we're just built for November, baby. But get out to the games, root for your teams. If you don't have a team to cheer for, root for the NUIC. And have a great, great weekend.